Good evening, I'm Soraya Mia and you're tuning into AWANI Tonight. PM Ismail Sabri held an hour-long conversation with the King, and we discussed the reality of housing affordability ahead of Budget 2023. That's coming up. The Prime Minister's audience with the Yang di-Pertuan Agong today was a pre-cabinet meeting. Istana Negara in a statement said the meeting was a weekly routine between the King and Datuk Seri Ismail Sabri Yaakob to discuss and exchange opinions in regard to government affairs. Rumours were growing strong that the PM is finally meeting with the King to seek consent to dissolve the Parliament soon. This is following UMNO Supreme Council's push for GE15 to be held this year. The Prime Minister arrived at Istana Negara at 3:49 p.m. He left about an hour later. It was actually a routine for Ismail Sabri to have an audience with the King a day before the weekly cabinet meeting. Separately, Communications and Multimedia Minister Tan Sri Anwar Musa confirmed that the cabinet meeting will be held on Friday, an indication that Parliament will not be dissolved tomorrow. 12 ministers in the cabinet from Perikatan Nasional signed a letter to the Yang di-Pertuan Agong, believed to voice their opposition towards GE15 this year. This was confirmed by Environment and Water Minister Datuk Sri Tuan Ibrahim Tuan Man and Education Minister Dr. Radzi Jidin. Radzi said the PN ministers believed the focus should be on the people's welfare at this time.
The senior minister also said his ministry had many structural matters to resolve and implement before the end of the current government's term. There are 31 ministers in Datuk Seri Ismail Sabri's cabinet, of whom 14 are from Barisan Nasional, 12 from PN, 4 from Gabungan Parti Sarawak, and 1 each from Gabungan Rakyat Sabah and Parti Bangsa Malaysia. Opposition lawmakers have also opposed holding GE15 this year, citing the possibility of floods during the northeast monsoon season expected from mid-November to March 2023.
The Yang di-Pertuan Agong has called for the Ministry of Environment and Water to focus on the disaster early warning system and aid distribution in preparation for floods. This is after he attended a briefing on the year-end weather and flood situation at the National Flood Forecasting and Warning Centre.
The King also instructed for coordination between the National Disaster Management Agency and other agencies to ensure efficient distribution of aid to the people. Malaysia is currently transitioning from the southwest monsoon phase, with the northeast monsoon expected to take place from November until March next year. As such, Malaysia Meteorological Department Deputy Director General Muhammad Hisham Muhammad Anip advised against holding the next general election during this period.
Sebab kenapa nak mengambil risiko dalam situasi kita nak menghadapi monsun timur laut yang kita tahu memang akan ada banjir di mana-mana nanti. Even dalam tempoh peralihan monsun sekarang ni pun kita tengok banyak tempat dah banjir. Di Johor banjir semalam, di Melaka 2-3 hari lepas ada banjir, di Perak pun ada banjir. Jadi makna dia dari segi kesesuaian tu, cuaca tu tak membantulah untuk mengadakan pilihan raya.
Meanwhile, the Public Accounts Committee PAC today expressed concern over the increasing trend in the federal government debt. Following the release of the Auditor General report today on the federal government expenditure, PAC Chairman Wong Kah-Woo said the federal debt in 2021 was 979.8 billion ringgit, or 63.4% of GDP. This is about a 100 billion ringgit increase from the year 2020.
Auditor General Nik Azman Nik Abdul Majid, who voiced similar concerns, said as a result of the increase in debt, interest payments on the national debt have also gone up to such an extent that for every 1 ringgit accrued in revenue, 16 cents are used to pay interest. He warned that borrowing money to service debts can only be a short-term measure and that Putrajaya must now start taking prudent steps.
Ya, sedangkan hutang pula separuh daripada hutang baru digunakan untuk bayar hutang lama, dan keadaan yang tidak boleh dibiarkan berterusan. Itu maksudnya, walaupun kita faham bahawa ini hanya patutnya langkah sementara. Jadi tugas kita sebagai auditor adalah untuk memberi penekanan kepada perkara tersebut.
For 2021, 52.4% of revenue was used to settle outstanding debts.
More than half of Malaysians feel that they are not eligible for the existing government housing schemes. This is based on the latest Property Guru's Consumer Sentiment Survey. We discuss more with Sheldon Fernandez about issues surrounding housing affordability in the country.
Based on our findings from the Consumer Sentiment Survey, 51% of Malaysians surveyed feel that they are not eligible for government housing schemes and can't afford to buy a house without assistance. 52% of the residents also cited unable to afford a home down payment, which is the top barrier when it comes to applying for or wanting to transact a home. 61% of our respondents, though, find the choices of homes in the affordable housing scheme not being attractive. Right now, this is likely due to location or even the type of property. And the house ownership campaign, the HOC, 88%, which is a high 88% respondents felt that it should be extended.
With consumers expecting prices to further increase due to inflation and OPR hike, Sheldon suggests a few measures the government can take to tackle housing affordability.
What we think will be good is to have an expansion, really, just based on the high respondent rates around home ownership campaign, but also then, sort of extend it towards a secondary market to create demand and also further encourage home ownership, which is again is a top of the mind when it comes to potential property owners. We also think reducing or removing stamp duty for residential properties of 500,000 and below for all Malaysians will help spur some of this momentum in the market. Housing schemes with government subsidies that can help developers reduce monthly repayments for home buyers, that will help. So very, very targeted subsidies, and obviously incentivizing developers as well, right? Given all the trends that I've just highlighted, to adopt accredited green certification tools to promote green development in the country for the better future and also for the longer term sustainability of homes and home ownership.
Will we see the allocation for healthcare in Budget 2023 move towards the recommended 5% of GDP from the current 2.1%, a step towards reversing decades of underinvestment? On Consider This, we speak to our guests about reforming healthcare financing in Malaysia. We'll take a short break. Stay tuned.
Ini masanya untuk Asia bangkit. Kami bawakan diskusi mengenai pasca pandemik, pemulihan ekonomi, teknologi tinggi, perubahan iklim dan banyak lagi. Saksikan agenda Awani Asia bersama pakar dan koresponden Asia kami setiap Sabtu 9 malam di Astro Awani.
Senyuman adalah sesuatu yang terindah untuk dihadiahkan sebagai tanda kasih buat yang tersayang dan rakan taulan. Senyuman berputik dari hamparan kegembiraan, seterusnya memekar serta mengeratkan hubungan. Beras cap rambutan, beras yang berkualiti, bersama dinikmati. Cap rambutan.
Welcome back. At least 38 people have been killed in a mass shooting at a childcare facility in northeastern Thailand. Police say at least 22 children are among the dead. The gunman is reported to be former police officer Banya Kamrab, and Thai media said he killed himself and his family in the wake of the shooting. Reports say the attack began when a man armed with a gun and a knife stormed into the childcare facility in the rural Nong Bua Lampu province. According to police, Panya was dismissed from the police force over drug offenses last year. A motive for the attack remains unclear. Mass shootings are relatively rare in Thailand, although gun ownership is high for the region. At least 15 people were found dead after a vessel carrying migrants sank off the Greek island of Lesbos, close to Turkey's coast. This was the second maritime disaster involving migrants since yesterday. According to Greek Coast Guards, the sunken boat was carrying about 40 people. 5 have been rescued, while 15 bodies recovered, leaving about 20 people missing. A search was being conducted along the wider coast of Lesbos for those who may have made it to the shores. 3 migrants were earlier found trapped in a remote area. On Wednesday, Greek authorities rescued 30 migrants whose boat sank after hitting a rocky area in stormy waters in southern Greece. Meanwhile, Myanmar's junta jailed a Japanese documentary filmmaker for 10 years for encouraging dissent against the military and breaking communications laws. Toru Kubota was detained near an anti-government rally in Yangon in July, along with 2 Myanmar citizens.
The 26-year-old was sentenced to 7 years in prison for violating a law on telecommunications and 3 years for incitement, a charge widely used against opposition lawmakers. Kubota's trial for immigration charges is ongoing, with a hearing set for next Wednesday. According to a profile on Film Marketplace, Film Freeway, Kubota has previously made documentaries on Myanmar's Muslim Rohingya minority, refugees and ethnic issues in Myanmar. Kubota is the 5th foreign journalist to be detained in Myanmar. 2 Americans, 1 Polish journalist and another Japanese detained were eventually freed and deported.
Over in Australia, Sydney records its wettest year in 164 years as authorities brace for major floods in the east. Australia's largest city has recorded over 2,200 millimeters of rain in a year, for the first time since records began in 1858.
By Thursday afternoon, Sydney had received about 2,213 millimeters of rainfall for the year, surpassing the previous record of 2,194 millimeters set in 1950. Heavy rain is expected to continue across Sydney and other parts of southeast Australia, peaking on Saturday. During the past 2 years, floods have struck Sydney's suburbs 3 times, forcing tens of thousands of people to flee their homes. More downpours are forecast for the rest of 2022 due to a rare 3rd straight year of the La Nina weather phenomenon, typically associated with increased rainfall.
Among the biggest issues faced by higher education students as Malaysia enters the endemic phase of COVID-19 is the rising cost of living. Ahead of Budget 2023, founder and president of Higher Education Malaysia Association, Ui Zi Hao, calls for the government to set aside funds to areas most underfunded, such as accommodation affordability.
Accommodations, food prices, as well as the transportation has become the crucial problems. I put examples in University Malaya, one of them. You know how expensive is PJ, is Kuala Lumpur, Bangsas and those areas. They don't really have enough accommodations for all the students. Now, it is actually a very inconsistent scenarios across all public universities in Malaysia. Some of the universities, they have ample and also affordable kind of in-campus accommodation for the students. But from the examples that I quoted just now in University Malaya, they probably don't have enough, and it's so expensive for you to really rent rooms in PJs and this. So if you talk about underfunding, obviously the government will need to provide more funding in combating the rising living costs, accommodations and things, and of course, not just talk about providing them affordable things, but also opening more opportunities for them to involve in entrepreneurial activities, so that they can earn themselves a living, take responsibility of their life, providing more opportunities for them to work on campus, part-time jobs and things like this.
Meanwhile, youth activist Nurul Rifaya Muhammad Iqbal also expressed her concerns on the rising cost of living. She urges the Higher Education Ministry to prioritize the right things when channeling funds allocated under Budget 2023.
RM3.50 per meal, and then RM3.50 like times 3 per day is like equivalent to 315 per month roughly. So I think it's like a lot of money that we require in order for us to survive in university. And then RM150 from earlier, I think it's not enough because it's only helped us for a long term, for short term, not for a long term. So what I'm actually hoping for the government is actually maybe can think like, maybe can provide us, we're not asking a free meal or something, but maybe can provide us some initiatives that maybe, if you don't want to help us in terms of food security, maybe you can help us in terms of us in accommodations or maybe about books, perhaps, because during the pandemic, 2 years of the pandemic, we doesn't have any, I would say that money for us to buy books because everything is online, and in order for us to go to the library and stuff, of course, there are so many restrictions because of the pandemic. So when everything is going back normal nowadays, it actually going to make us, perplexed and worried about our, our journey in the higher education.
You can catch the full conversation ahead of the budget tabling on It's About Youth later at 12:30 a.m. with me, Soraya Mia, and Faye Kwan. That is all we have for you on AWANI tonight. I'm Soraya Mia. Thank you for watching, and we'll see you again.